Your engine is shaking. The car feels rough when it is idling. When you try to accelerate, the car hesitates. When you try to accelerate, the car loses power. These are classic symptoms of an engine misfire. You will also see the check engine light on your dashboard. Sometimes this light will be steady. Other times, it will be flashing. A flashing check engine light is a serious warning. It indicates a severe misfire that requires your immediate attention. Driving the car in this condition can lead to significant and expensive damage. It is not something that should be ignored or put off for later. The problem needs to be diagnosed and repaired as soon as possible. The most critical danger of ignoring a P0301 code is damage to your catalytic converter. When cylinder 1 misfires, it fails to burn the fuel that was injected into it. This unburned raw gasoline does not just disappear. Instead, it gets pushed out of the cylinder during the exhaust stroke. The raw fuel then travels down the exhaust system and enters the catalytic converter. The catalytic converter operates at extremely high temperatures to clean the exhaust gases. When raw fuel enters this hot environment, it ignites. That ignition causes the converter's internal temperature to skyrocket far beyond its normal operating range. This extreme heat can melt the precious metals inside, destroying the converter. A flashing check engine light is your car's way of screaming for help. It is a direct signal that a misfire is severe enough to cause catalytic converter damage. A catalytic converter is one of the most expensive components in your vehicle's emission system. Replacing it can cost thousands of dollars, a far greater expense than fixing the initial misfire. Therefore, when you feel that shake and see that flashing light, the smart move is to pull over safely and stop driving the vehicle. Addressing the misfire promptly not only restores your car's performance, but also protects you from a much larger repair bill down the road. The loss of power you feel is a direct result of the misfire. Your engine is designed to run on all its cylinders working in harmony. A 4-cylinder engine with one misfiring cylinder is effectively running on only 3 cylinders. This means it is operating at a 25% power deficit. The shaking and vibration are caused by the imbalance in the engine's rotation. Each power stroke from a firing cylinder pushes the crankshaft. But when one cylinder fails to fire, it creates a gap in this rhythmic pushing motion. This interruption creates the rough, unbalanced feeling you notice from the driver's seat. The code P0301 specifically tells you that cylinder number 1 is the source of this problem. Now for the technical reason behind the code. Your car is equipped with a sophisticated computer called the Engine Control Unit, or ECU. This computer constantly monitors hundreds of parameters to ensure the engine is running efficiently and smoothly. One of the most important things it watches is the rotational speed of the crankshaft. The crankshaft is the backbone of your engine, converting the up and down motion of the pistons into the rotational force that powers your wheels. The ECU knows the exact firing order of the cylinders and expects to see a tiny, precise increase in crankshaft speed every time a cylinder fires and pushes a piston down. A P0301 trouble code is set when the ECU detects a problem specifically with cylinder 1. During what should have been the power stroke for cylinder 1, the ECU was looking for that small, expected acceleration of the crankshaft. However, it did not see it. The speed of the crankshaft either remained the same or even decreased slightly when it should have increased. This lack of acceleration tells the ECU that the combustion event did not happen as it should have. In simple, clear terms, the ECU saw no RPM gain on cylinder 1. That is the very definition of a misfire from the computer's perspective. The ECU is very precise in its monitoring. It uses a sensor, typically called the crankshaft position sensor, to track the speed of the crankshaft with incredible accuracy. This sensor can detect the minute speed variations that occur between each cylinder's power stroke. When it registers that cylinder 1 failed to contribute to the engine's rotation, it immediately logs the fault. It then triggers the check engine light to alert you, the driver, that something is wrong. The code P0301 is specific, pointing directly to cylinder 1 as the culprit, which is extremely helpful for diagnosis. It narrows down the search for the problem significantly. It is important to understand that the P0301 code only tells you which cylinder is misfiring. It does not tell you why it is misfiring. A successful combustion event requires 3 key elements: a proper air-fuel mixture, A strong spark, adequate compression. A failure in any one of these three areas can cause a misfire. The cause could be electrical, such as a bad spark plug or ignition coil. It could be fuel-related, like a clogged fuel injector. Or it could be a mechanical issue, such as a vacuum leak or low engine compression. The code is just the starting point of our investigation. Before you start buying any parts, there is a simple and effective diagnostic step you can perform. This is often called the swap test, and it can cost you $0. The goal of this test is to determine if the misfire is caused by a component that can be easily moved from one cylinder to another. The most common components to use for this test are the ignition coil, the spark plug. This test is a logical process of elimination that can save you a lot of time and money by preventing you from replacing perfectly good parts. It is a fundamental technique for any DIY diagnosis of a misfire code. First, you need to identify cylinder 1 on your engine. It is often the cylinder at the front of the engine closest to the accessory belts. Consult your vehicle's service manual or look up the firing order online to be certain. Locate cylinder 1 and the adjacent cylinder 2. Make sure the engine is completely cool. Turn the ignition off. Disconnect the negative battery terminal for safety. Carefully remove the ignition coil from cylinder 1. Remove the ignition coil from cylinder 2. The next step is the actual swap. Install the coil from cylinder 1 onto cylinder 2. Install the coil from cylinder 2 onto cylinder 1. Tighten the bolts properly. Click the electrical connectors securely back into place. Reconnect the battery if you disconnected it. Start the car and let it run for a minute or two. The engine will likely still run rough. Use your OBD-II scanner to check for any new or pending trouble codes. If the misfire has moved to the second cylinder and the scanner shows P0301, the fault is the ignition coil you moved. Replace that coil. If the misfire stays on cylinder 1 and the scanner still reads P0301, the coil is not the cause. Check items you did not move. Spark plug fuel injector wiring to cylinder 1 or a vacuum leak affecting that cylinder. This simple test effectively rules out or confirms a bad coil in just a few minutes. Section 4. Common causes of a cylinder misfire. Once you have performed the swap test, you can investigate the most common causes for a P0301 misfire. The leading culprit is often the spark plug. Spark plugs are wear items and do not last forever. Over time, the electrodes can wear down. They can become fouled with carbon. They can become fouled with oil. They can become fouled with fuel deposits. This can prevent the plug from creating a strong, hot spark needed for ignition. The first step is to remove the spark plug from cylinder 1 and inspect it. If it is covered in black soot, if it is wet with fuel, if the ceramic insulator is cracked, if the electrode is worn away, it must be replaced. Visual. Compare a new clean spark plug next to an old fouled spark plug. It is generally good practice to replace all spark plugs at the same time. Another very common cause is a failed ignition coil or coil boot. The ignition coil transforms the car's low 12-volt power into thousands of volts for the spark. Coils can fail internally due to heat and vibration, leading to a weak or non-existent spark. The swap test described earlier is the best way to diagnose a bad coil. Also, inspect the rubber boot that connects the coil to the spark plug. Boots can degrade over time and develop cracks. Cracks allow the spark to arc to the cylinder head instead of jumping the spark plug gap, causing a misfire. A faulty fuel injector is another prime suspect. The fuel injector is a small electronic valve that sprays a precise amount of fuel into the cylinder. The injector can become clogged with debris. The injector can fail electronically and stop delivering fuel. A lean condition will cause a misfire. Diagnose a faulty injector by listening with a long screwdriver, or listen with a mechanic's stethoscope. You should hear a distinct, rapid clicking sound. If it is silent while the others are clicking, it has likely failed. Finally, consider the possibility of a vacuum leak. The engine needs a specific ratio of air to fuel to run correctly. A vacuum leak is unmetered air entering after the mass airflow sensor. A leak in the intake manifold gasket near the runner for cylinder 1 can let that cylinder get too much air. That leans out the air-fuel mixture and can cause a persistent misfire isolated to that cylinder. Inspect for leaks by visually checking all vacuum hoses for cracks. Carefully spray a small amount of brake cleaner around the intake gasket area with the engine running. A change in engine RPM will indicate a leak. Section 5. Repair options and costs. When it comes to fixing a P0301 misfire, you have several repair choices, and the cost can vary based on the cause and whether you do the work yourself. For a do-it-yourself repair, the parts are often quite affordable. A single replacement spark plug typically costs between $5 and $20, depending on the type, copper, iridium, platinum, and your vehicle model. If the swap test pointed to a bad ignition coil, a new coil-on-plug unit can range from $40 to $200. The price difference depends on make and model. European brands often cost more. If the problem is traced to a faulty fuel injector, part cost for DIY replacement is generally between $50 and $300. Some injectors are easily accessible, others may be buried under the intake manifold. A simple vacuum leak from a cracked hose can be the cheapest fix, often less than $10 for a new hose. If you perform diagnosis and repair yourself, you could solve a P0301 code for as little as $10 or up to around $300 for pricier parts. Having a professional handle it adds costs, primarily labor and diagnostics. Most shops charge a diagnostic fee, typically $100 to $150. This often covers the first hour of a technician's time. Labor can add another $100 to $300, depending on job complexity. Replacing a single accessible ignition coil might take 30 minutes. Replacing a fuel injector under the intake manifold can take several hours. The cost of inaction is the biggest risk. Driving with a flashing check engine light will likely destroy your catalytic converter. Replacing a catalytic converter can cost $1,000 to $2,500 or more. That turns a minor repair into a major financial burden. Addressing a misfire promptly restores performance and prevents catastrophic, expensive emissions damage. Fix it now to save your engine.